a one-loss Tennessee is still a very attractive playoff team. And frankly, I think if you go by resumes, who teams beat, who teams have a chance to beat, I do think that Tennessee is a one-loss team. And look, there's a lot of scenarios out there.
Yeah.
But I just think that Ohio State and Michigan, and that's a lot of what we went through, the Big Ten is going to have one loss. One of those teams is going to lose. And when you start comparing teams, now I don't know if the committee would put in Tennessee, a one-loss Tennessee over a one-loss Ohio State, but I think Michigan is a different conversation.
Well, the Tennessee's problem is the fact that a lot of it is with the committee. Unfortunately, a lot of it with the committee is what have you done for me lately? And they face 3 cupcakes to end the season, right? So they can obviously rack up style points, but Oregon has an opportunity to beat a Utah team that they have ranked 13th right now. They have an opportunity to beat either probably a UCLA or a USC in the Pac-12 championship game that will be ranked inside the top 10. So I think the strength of those two, and you can't go and compare the scores of who lost to Georgia worse. I mean, what are we getting into? Well, we didn't lose to Georgia as bad as you did. I mean, that can't be your rationale to get in. So I think they would take a conference champion over it. But hey, Tennessee's got a shot, and they got to hope for. I think they got to hope for Oregon to lose. They got to hope for Tennessee fans should be big Texas fans. That, one UT rooting for another this week, because if they knock off TCU, I think that helps Tennessee's cause tremendously, Chris. But I can already see Blake's eye twitching over there, so we need to probably move on to another topic because we're instead of talking about the college football playoffs. But Tennessee fans, you need to put on some burn orange this weekend because you need to root for Texas to beat TCU.
I have no response. No, here's oh boy, questions are coming in. I knew this is going to unload a bunch of questions, and we are here for you guys, so we're going to answer.
You're going to shoot me, aren't you?
I told Chris not to bring any of this up because I'm about to spam our YouTube link for the video earlier in the comments here, but there's so many different scenarios still. Look, Brent's got all these questions. I'll be honest, like I'm looking through this right now, and my head is spinning just looking at it. If LSU wins out, does the SEC get a team in? Yes. I have said before, and you guys can tell me if you agree or disagree. If LSU wins the SEC championship by beating Georgia, they are getting into the college football playoff. I don't think you can keep them out because here's the problem too. If LSU beats Georgia, guess what? Georgia's still getting in. So in that scenario, LSU and Georgia are both in my opinion. So yes, I think Brent's asking these questions. That does become the interesting aspect, right? And here's what Tennessee fans will look at. If that's your scenario, it's going to be Tennessee will beat LSU by whatever. But like, there's so many different factors. I think 2-loss LSU absolutely in the playoff at that point.
Yeah, the problem, because I think you're right. I think Georgia, even with the loss in the SEC title game, gets in. Now, if it loses before then, we're having a different conversation. If LSU wins, then it's going to be hard to keep LSU out given its resume and a conference title. And the irony of that would be that would probably be at the expense of a Tennessee team that went down to Baton Rouge and whipped the Tigers in their backyard. I'm not saying it would be fair. Tennessee fans would be howling, and I promise you I would not blame them. But you can just kind of see that as a brewing scenario. Now, that's a lot of ifs. First of all, I don't think that LSU is going to beat Georgia, but this is what we do this time of year.
Yeah, I think the SEC champion's always going to get in. I mean, as long as it's not some weird scenario where an SEC champion had like 3 losses or something. But like I point back to it all the time. In 2017, Auburn was playing as good as anybody in the country. If they had beat Georgia in that SEC championship game, they were going to get in the playoff as a 2-loss team. I mean, that was going to happen. Gus Malzahn had them rolling in that year, and then they ran into a buzzsaw in Atlanta. But I'm just telling you, I think that when it comes down to it, Georgia, I think runs the table, is one. Winner of Ohio State, Michigan ends up being 2, and then you got two more spots there. I think the Pac-12 champion is probably going to have one loss, whether it's UCLA, USC, or Oregon. I think they've held them out way too long. They're going to get in. And then Tennessee's hope is that TCU loses, because if TCU runs the table and goes undefeated, they're getting in. They're not going to take a undefeated Power 5 champion and not put them in the playoff over a one loss team. So I think that Tennessee should root for Texas this weekend, because that's their biggest threat with that. I think they knock TCU out of there. I think Tennessee's, all they got to do is go out and play like they've played before they ran into Georgia, and they'll be just fine.
There you go, Chris.
And for the record, I think.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think TCU takes a regular season loss. At Texas, at Baylor, and an Iowa State team that's better than the record, I would look for that to happen. But who knows? That's what makes it fun. Go ahead.
Yeah, but I'm saying if they went undefeated, there's no way the committee is going to put in one-loss Tennessee over undefeated.
No, I agree.
So yeah, they need to just go ahead and get it done early with. Tennessee needs to root for Texas this weekend.
We talked about this so much this morning that, Chris, I'm about to reel this scenario off in my head without looking at anything, because it is in my brain to the point to where I can't forget it. If you're rooting for chaos, here's what you're rooting for. You are rooting for the following. If you want to put this on your board, it's not going to happen, but this is the ultimate chaos for the committee. LSU and Georgia play in the SEC championship. LSU beats Georgia. Ohio State and Michigan play an absolute classic of a game. It goes right down to the wire. Whoever wins, the loser's still in the conversation. TCU loses. Oregon wins the Pac-12. Tennessee wins out. In that scenario, you are looking at Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan. TCU would be out of the equation, right, Chris? I think that's what we had talked about. They would be out of the equation with one loss, I think. But Oregon all of a sudden makes things a lot more interesting. LSU makes it interesting by winning the SEC. Tennessee still sitting there as a possibility. Like, there in that scenario, you're talking 6 or 7 teams where it's not just looking at one team that you're like, all right, if we leave that team out, that's going to be the one team we're talking about. You're talking about multiple teams in that scenario having to make those decisions. There's the scenario you're rooting for. And Chris, I'm done. I have nothing else to say on the college football playoff until after the SEC championship game. That's it. So there you go.
Well, you'll be happy to know you just broke 538's model. I get the unlikely to happen box that pops up and says this is unlikely to occur in 0.25% of simulations to try something else. Now, when I put Tennessee winning out, that's what put it over the edge, which I don't think that was about Tennessee. I think that was just about the number of combinations. But up until Tennessee, and by the way, I had Michigan to beat Ohio State in that scenario just to make it a little more improbable. Okay, here's who gets in under that scenario, not doing anything with Tennessee. Michigan, better than 99%. Oregon at 74%. LSU at 30%. And Tennessee, without putting in the win-out condition, which I think is they're going to be favored in all of those, but that just checking that box puts the model over the edge. Tennessee would be the 4th team. No, I'm sorry. Georgia would be the 4th team at 41%.
Georgia would have to be in still. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that surprised me that the odds on Georgia dropped that far.
Georgia's
if I change it to Ohio State,
SEC championship game. Let's
if I change it to Ohio State, then it's in this order: Ohio State, Oregon, LSU, and Georgia are the 4.